Well, good afternoon to you. 306 Now News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we are making sense of the news. Coming up this hour, the left's new attack on Speaker Mike Johnson. He's a Christian. Chris Bedford will talk about that with us. The anti-Christian bigotry very much on display, and it's getting aggressive quickly. Philip Lenjicki will be here at 4:30, an investigative reporter for the Daily Caller News Foundation, and an expert on China to explain what's happening as Gavin Newsom just went to China. He tackled a small child and then spanked the kid. Did you see that video? Isn't that weird? Philip will explain how that all went down. And then Dr. Marty McCary is here today as the American public decides to give up on COVID jabs. Nobody, and I mean nobody, getting this latest round of COVID jabs as ordered to by the Biden administration. We'll explore that with Dr. Marty McCary. How did we reach this point? And you can join us today at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. Yeah, I do. We're gonna talk at some length about what's happening with Mike Johnson, because the second he became the Speaker of the House, the media went crazy. They decided that they would begin compiling what we call in political terms an oppo file on Mike Johnson. What's the thing that you can use against him? And the thing they decided they could use against him was his Christian faith. He's not shy about being a Christian. He's, in fact, fought for religious liberty for many years. And that's one of the great things about him becoming Speaker is he's actually a constitutional lawyer. That's a great thing to have at a high position of power in the country, somebody who has knowledge of and a respect for the Constitution and the founders and for the role of religious faith in our lives. And they want to use this against him. They think it is absurd that he points to the Bible as a guideline for how he should think and conduct his life. And he does. He says that openly. He's not shy about that at all. So now they're using that as an attack against him. They very much hate him for this. And I'm seeing headline after headline about how he's a religious fundamentalist. He's a Christian nationalist. He's a tyrant because he believes in God. As opposed to us, we are so much wiser, those of us who don't believe in God. The media constantly projects. We are God, they tell us, in so many words. And so we'll get into this. Speaker Mike Johnson and even the comedian Stephen Colbert getting in on the act, going on his show. I couldn't even have predicted this. I guess I could have predicted it, but we didn't realize between yesterday when I announced that we were going to talk about this at some length today, and today, Colbert did his show last night, and he spent a huge chunk of it attacking Mike Johnson for being Christian. And he does it in the open. There's no shame whatsoever. And I guess, whatever small audience he has rewards him for that. Applause, people laughing. They love it. Attacking him. They did a whole riff. They did like a parody video of Noah's Ark to make fun of the guy and to make fun of Christians. We live in bizarre times. We live in very bizarre and dark times, for that matter. And boy, the left is really exposing itself, isn't it? I mean, when they're not actually exposing themselves, which some of them do, they're really exposing themselves in terms of what they believe in. And it's not people of faith. It is for the destruction of those people. If you're a Jewish person in the United States right now, how confusing is this moment that you're going through? Chances are, if you're a conservative Jewish person, there's nothing confusing about it at all. You've been watching this happen for a long time and going, man, our country's going in the wrong direction. This is not good for me and my family. If you're a Democrat Jewish person, this has got to be crazy right now. Like, what is happening? I thought you were my friend. No, I'm with Hamas now. What do you mean you're with Hamas now? We're watching campus after campus across this country descend into like the craziest possible interpretation of events. And the media have been aiding and abetting anti-Israeli sentiment, anti-Jewish sentiment like crazy. Every opportunity they have to take up an attack against Israel, they're taking it. Remember, was it 2 weeks ago now? Time all runs together so quickly, but it was the October 7th was when the attack happened. Hamas attacks Israel. And in the week or so after, remember, there's this hospital in Gaza, and the whole American media jumped all over it and said Israel bombed a hospital and killed hundreds of people. And then, of course, within minutes, we actually knew the truth was probably not that at all. In fact, we said it as the story was developing that very day, right here on this air. Like, that doesn't make any sense. Also, we're hearing reports that it wasn't Israel at all, that it was somebody in Gaza who fired this rocket off. And it turned out it was Palestinian Islamic Jihad, the far crazier version of Hamas in Gaza. And they bombed the parking lot. They didn't bomb the actual hospital. It wasn't hundreds of people killed. It was a couple dozen. And they're idiots. They apparently had misfired this rocket. We had audio of Hamas people talking, Hamas terrorists talking to each other going, well, that was one of ours? Oh, man, that's really bad. And the media got way over its skis because they instantly bought Hamas's explanation. Hamas controls Gaza. And they instantly bought it. Why? Because it fulfilled their priors. They were hoping that Israel had done this. Israel's the bad guy in their view. So they ran with it. And let me just say, I said it kind of jokingly last week. I may have told you that I did some stand-up comedy last week, not something I routinely do. But as an aside, I mentioned it just during my set. I said, and by the way, can we pause for a moment? Because I was pointing out how crazy and anti-Semitic so many of these Democrats are, including in positions of power in the United States Congress. I said, by the way, can we just pause for a moment and emphasize how crazy it is that there are people who believe the Jews control the media? Have you heard this before? Have the last few weeks demonstrated that to you? Like, what? How insane do you have to be? It's like the media is constantly rooting against the Jewish people with every possible turn. We live in dark and crazy times. We really do. And if you believe in a higher power, if you don't believe that you as a human being are the end-all be-all, if you're not fully obsessed with yourself, then you are fighting an uphill battle against all of our institutions right now. Are you a narcissist? You're totally fine. Are you godless? You're totally fine. Are you comfortable with objective reality being changed at any given moment and you will adopt the new line, whatever it is? You're totally fine. You're totally fine. You're going to be totally fine. But what about if you do believe in truth? What about if you sit around and you go, well, wait a second. I know there's a difference between men and women. I knew it from the moment I was a child. Have you ever had a kid? If you've had a kid, you know a child can instantly distinguish. There are no cultural pressures. This is not a nature versus nurture debate, really. It's just all nature. It's not, oh, they were raised to think. No, they can pick it out in a second. Because they're unencumbered by the stupidity that we foist on people. No, you can't believe in objective reality anymore. Little children can recognize things instantly, instinctively. You know, children can also distinguish between ugly and beauty. Nobody likes to admit that, but that's true. It's in every survey they've ever done. You show a little baby a beautiful face, they react well to it. You show them an ugly face, they don't react well to it. They weren't trained that way. Like, CNN didn't tell them what to think of as beautiful and what not to. They just instantly recognize it. Instantly. And you know you do too, even if you don't want to admit it. So, objective reality exists. And once you recognize that, like, life is not entirely in your control. In fact, there's a lot that's outside of your control. And you have a lot of reverence for how big this universe is that we live in, the universe that we don't understand fully, right? Not to get too theological on you, but I'm telling you that something that sticks with me all the time is something that a great writer called C.S. Lewis wrote in his book, Mere Christianity. For real. And this is why, like, they're mocking Mike Johnson for being Christian. These people are disgraceful. And they shouldn't, because inside of them, they have the instinct that tells them that Mike Johnson is fundamentally right, even if they don't agree on the specifics about Christianity or whatever. Reverence and respect for a higher power is totally legitimate. And so what C.S. Lewis writes about in his book, remember, C.S. Lewis is a guy who was an atheist in his childhood and as an adult. And eventually, he becomes a Christian, and finally he becomes a Catholic. And in the process, he writes about all. In fact, actually, Mere Christianity started as a series of radio broadcasts that were turned into a book. It wasn't actually a book at first, where C.S. Lewis was asked to speak to the troops and to convey to them his thoughts on Christianity. You know, back when we lived in a world where it was okay to talk about this kind of stuff out loud in public to a broad audience. And Lewis said, inside of you, you have instincts. Every human being has instincts. What are those instincts? Well, you have basic ones, right? Right? If you don't have enough rest, you have an instinct for sleep. You need to get sleep in order to restore yourself. If you're hungry, you have an instinct for food. If you have sexual desire, that instinct exists within you. Obviously. These desires exist for a reason. And one of the desires that you have is for something greater than yourself, for eternity, for there to be a God. And now some people have reckoned with that and they've concluded at the end, well, there is no God. They don't think there is. But there's a reason you have this impulse inside of you. And so Lewis's argument is really simple. And it's actually kind of mind-opening. I love it. So that's why I'm reiterating it to you now. You wouldn't have that impulse were it not possible for it to be fulfilled. It's true in every other category that you're aware of. Food, sex, sleep, take your pick. It is possible for it to be fulfilled. Does it happen? Does it happen in every category? No, it doesn't. Not everybody's either has the means, the access, the capability, whatever it is. But in other words, like humanity does have the possibility of fulfillment. And some of us choose the easy way out, right? You choose like a cheap imitation of the thing that you actually need. Whether that's, you know, pornography in lieu of actual meaningful intimate relationships. Or it's candy in lieu of an actual healthy meal, right? Or in the case of something bigger than yourself, that whole, you know, the God thing. What if it's just envisioning yourself as God and becoming a full-blown freaking narcissist about everything and then forcing the universe to bend to you and your peculiarities and your shifting temperaments? What if that's the cheap way out? What if that's the unfulfilling, toxic way out? Of course it is. That's actually what's going on. And I saw do we have the audio today of this? There's audio of this like crazy, it's like a Libs of TikTok video. We have that? So it's a guy, there's this guy, I saw this video, I sent it to Corey right away this morning. And it was Corey and I get together every day, we put the show together and line up the guests and all the audio, as you might imagine, for a radio show. And there's this guy who's going, there's video going around Twitter right now. He's a man, quite obviously. And he dresses up as one of the ugliest women you've ever seen in your life. It's so obviously a dude dressing as a woman. It's not even funny. In a way, it's amusing, but at its core, it's sad. And so he films videos of himself sitting at restaurants, scolding waiters for treating him with respect by calling him sir. They'll deliver his food to him, right? These people who are paid assuredly much less than whatever he's paid to do whatever he does. They're dropping the food off at the table. Here you go, sir. Here's your meal. Here's your drink, sir. Yes, sir. I'll get that for you, sir. They're attentive. They're polite. They're nice to him. And what does he do in return? He films himself having these interactions. He scolds them for saying sir. He tells them to get their manager. And then he seeks to get their lives destroyed for doing nothing more than serving him. This narcissistic buffoon. Listen to some of it. This is the video. This guy filmed this and then released it in public.
It looks like he's having a nice feast.
She, her.
Go ahead.
Yeah, it's okay. It's all good.
But it was not all good.
Hi. I use she, her pronouns. I'm not sir.
Oh, so sorry.
Yeah, like it's like a knife in the heart. I did specifically ask ahead of time not to be called sir. Yeah, I'm just going to go. Yeah, the Sweetwater starts at,
yes,
okay.
Sir? I'm so sorry. I apologize.
It's just always like a knife. It always hurts every single time. I was wondering if there's a manager I could talk to about something that happened. Yeah, I was called sir.
Oh, okay.
It just really sucks every time it happens.
Sorry about that.
I don't need to be called ma'am. I just need to not be called sir.
If you, if this guy, say you work customer service, this guy calls you because he's got trouble with his cable or something, and you're talking to him, what do you say? Thank you for calling, sir. I can take care of that for you. Let me see. What did you say? What cable package is it? You know, that kind of thing. Right? You would deal with him like a human being with reverence, respect. And instead, what we've created is this world where all of that is getting torn apart to the point that you're not even allowed to be polite for fear that you're committing a sin. Isn't that the craziest thing? That decency is now used against you. And all of these people are thoroughly decent. There wasn't a person in any of the... I didn't play the whole thing for you. I spared you that. But there wasn't a person in this video who wasn't being a thoroughly decent human being. Doing exactly what good parents have raised their children to do. And now, I grew up in a Marine Corps household, so it may have been a little different for me. I found that there's a lot of things that were a little different for me. But by and large, I don't think it was entirely different in this way. We had car rides everywhere we went. It was, yes, sir, yes, ma'am, no, sir, no, ma'am. That was literally the speech we would get before we would arrive at an event. You remember your place. You are children. You will treat adults with respect. You will say, yes, sir, yes, ma'am, no, sir, no, ma'am. That was it. It was very obvious expectations for us. And that was a sign of respect and reverence. And the left, I realize it all kind of comes together. I mean, everything, I know I've covered a range of things here in just this opening. Everything from Hamas to anti-Christian bigotry to the trans insanity. But it is all connected. It is all really at the epicenter. It's a part of kind of a Marxist, godless chaos that's been injected into our lives. And you are being called upon to bow before it. And all I'm asking is that you don't. Please don't. Stand up to it, stand up for yourself, and most importantly, stand up for the people you love. Well, let's go to the phones. We got Mike calling in from Wheaton, line 2. Mike, go ahead. You're on the Vince Coglianese Show, sir.
I've just been amused all day by your promo about Mike Johnson, the Christian, and the attacks on him.
Yeah.
Throughout the Obama presidency, I heard nothing on talk radio other than fear of Sharia law, and he wasn't even a Muslim. Look, we don't want your creepy superstitions imposed on the rest of us. You can have your daughter sit on your lap, and you can put on your promise rings all you want. You can speak in tongues all you want. You can be as weird as you want to be. Don't tell us that we have to follow your direction. Do not.
Who's telling you that you have to? Mike, who's telling you that you have to?
He says separation of church and state is a fiction, that this is a Christian nation. That is.
He says, no, he did not say that. You're wrong about that. He said that the government cannot interfere in the practice of religion.
He said separation of church and state is a fiction.
He said, no, he did not. You're wrong. I'm just telling you. I'm fact-checking you live on the air. You're wrong about that. And in fact, he talked about Jefferson's opinion on this very subject and said that it is right and appropriate that a religious people can have a government. But it is not right for the government to dictate how a religion operates. That wall was designed to keep the government away from you and your family and your faith. Just amazing. We'll get into more of this coming up, the actual facts, with Chris Bedford just moments away. Good afternoon to you. 3:35 now. News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we are making sense of the news. Coming up today on the program, Philip Lenjicki will be with us. He's an expert on China at 4:30 as we get into a number of big stories involving China, including, do you see this? China has erased Israel from its online maps. They've decided to cause more chaos in the midst of the chaos we've already got. They seem to be inducing it. We'll talk to Philip about that decision-making. Also, Dr. Marty McCary is here at 5:30 today as we discuss how no American, really, virtually no, only 3% of Americans have taken their Biden-recommended COVID jabs. Only 3%. 97% have said, yeah, thanks, but no thanks. Marty McCary will explain why that is. And you can join us today at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. I want to get into some more detail here. Speaker Mike Johnson is the source, or on the receiving end of a number of hateful headlines right now, just attacking him for being Christian. story after story of the Mother Jones. Mike Johnson conducted seminars promoting the U.S. as a Christian nation. The New York Times with a piece, Speaker Mike Johnson and the role of religion in politics. CNN, Mike Johnson symbolizes a new turn for the religious right. New York Magazine, Speaker Mike Johnson's old-time religion. The New Republic is saying that Mike Johnson has a dangerous victim complex, writing about his Christianity. And on and on and on. There are headlines everywhere on this subject. And not only are there headlines, you also have the late-night shows with their dwindling audiences deciding to alienate even their remaining Christian viewers. Here's Stephen Colbert last night.
That Hannity interview wasn't the first time Johnson advocated for his idea of a Christian government. This is him on the House floor just 6 months ago.
Jefferson clearly did not mean that metaphorical wall was to keep religion from influencing issues of civil government. To the contrary, it was meant to keep the federal government from impeding the religious practice of citizens. The founders wanted to protect the church from an encroaching state, not the other way around.
Exactly. You can read all about it in Jefferson's famous essay, "Yeah, I didn't mean that." Obviously, what he's saying is a crazy interpretation of the separation of church and state. Jefferson used that wall metaphor because a wall is closed off to both sides.
Yeah, and of course, Stephen Colbert wrong, Mike Johnson correct. Here's more Colbert mocking Mike Johnson's faith. He also says that he's trying to remove rights from gay people.
You don't want politics in your church, but if you let church into your politics, you end up with guys like Mike Johnson representing the church to young people, and they're all going to say, "No thanks, Jesus," no matter how fun it is at Youth Pastor Ricky's Leviticus karaoke night. Now, one big way Johnson wants to slip a little church tongue in your state hole, taking rights away from gay people. When the Supreme Court struck down anti-sodomy laws on privacy grounds, Johnson wrote, "By closing those bedroom doors, they have opened a Pandora's box."
Well, things have definitely gotten very crazy in the country, haven't they? They've gone bananas to the point that you are paying for abortions and transgender operations in the military now. So for anybody who ever said, "Oh, there's no slippery slope to any of this," well, we've slipped down the slope, son. But Mike Johnson does have thoughts on this idea of gay marriage as an institution in the country. He spoke to Sean Hannity about this last week, and if Stephen Colbert wasn't so dishonest, he might reference this.
On the marriage issue, no one has discussed that for as long as I can remember. This has been settled by the Supreme Court in the Obergefell opinion in 2015. So right. That's the decision. Now, they changed the definition of marriage that had been regarded by basically every human society for 5,000 years, but when 5 justices on the Supreme Court changed it, that became the law of the land. I'm a constitutional law attorney. I respect that, and we move forward.
Yeah, Mike Johnson also said it doesn't really matter what he believes fundamentally. The way you achieve something in government is you have to get other people to agree with you. You've got to have some consensus in order to change laws and to change minds. And so on that issue, he's on the losing end, and he said that out loud. Joining us now is Chris Bedford. He's the executive editor of the Common Sense Society magazine, and he's been watching all of this closely. Chris, thank you very much for joining us, as always.
Glad to be here.
Are you surprised by the attacks on Mike Johnson's faith that have come out so quickly?
No, not at all. I mean, Mike Johnson, despite the constant attacks that Republicans have been subject to for decades, Mike Johnson is really the first social conservative to be in a major position of Republican leadership in decades. There's been a lot of people on the Republican right who will pay lip service to these sorts of things, but you'll notice they very rarely do things. Until Donald Trump, none of them even showed up at the March for Life. They never want to talk about marriage. But yet you had the chairman of the Freedom Caucus voting in favor of gay marriage a few months ago before he suddenly realized, wait, we're supposed to be against that, and had to lobby the Senate the other way and say, wait, don't vote for what I just voted for. So a lot of that's atrophied. And now you finally have someone who's actually a social conservative in the seat. And one of the reasons why this position was abandoned by somebody, even though it's really a core concern to a lot of the Republican base and to a lot of the American people, and was a core concern of the Founding Fathers, is because of the vitriol and the hate and the lunacy that's directed towards you. It's funny, one of those headlines that you mentioned was that he has a victim complex about being a Christian. And it was among what, 20, 30, 40 headlines attacking him for being a Christian from the absolute heights of power. It's like, how dare he feel like he's under attack for his beliefs? You know, people like Stephen Colbert, it's sad. You know, if I recall, he's a Catholic. He refers to himself as kind of a faithful Catholic. And his generation has really overseen a massive, massive decline in church attendance. If any of the bishops or any of the lay leaders were CEOs in the private sphere, and they lost 50, 60% of the faithful, and there were periods where half of people who called themselves Catholics didn't even understand the basic tenets, well, everybody would be fired.
Yeah.
So to take lectures from him, take lectures from the tambourine-thwacking heretics like him is really rich.
Yeah, he mocked Mike Johnson. They even did like a parody video last night, like of some movie that Mike Johnson would get involved in Noah's Ark, and how there'd be dinosaurs on the Ark, and they're trying to make a mockery of him. And you know, I'm a Catholic, you're a Catholic. In this case, I couldn't imagine. I wouldn't make a mockery of a Christian just because, like for instance, Catholics are more open-minded on the specifics of creation than some other Christian sects. But that doesn't matter. I'm not going to sit here and mock you for those differences of opinion. But that's what Stephen Colbert did. He did that last night because I don't know what he's trying to do, but it's insulting, and it's meant to be demeaning. And the effect of it is not to achieve anything that he supposedly goes to church for, but instead quite the opposite, which is to make a mockery of faith broadly.
You know, and I was watching the clip that you sent me a few hours ago, and I was quietly cursing you for making me watch it. I have a life, so I didn't actually watch it last night.
Right.
And it's amazing how just incredibly smug the humor is. How much late night comedy has changed since I really stopped watching it 15 or so years ago, to maybe broad but kind of liberal, to just so insular, so navel-gazing, so incredibly smug in the New York City superiority to the rest of the world, and also just how shocked these people are to find out that there are people out there who actually hold Christian beliefs. I mean, you hear a lot about, well, all religions need to get along. You need to tolerate this, you need to tolerate that. But when they actually hear what a Christian believes, well, there's no toleration for that. There's so many lectures from people who are non-believers or have insane beliefs on what you as a Christian ought to believe, and don't you think this and don't you think that. The crowd out there cheering that, I guess, a fundamental Christian precept is to seize wealth from the citizens and hand it back and hand it out to progressive policies. That was the one Christian policy he supposedly mentioned that they got an applause line. I guess he missed church a few weeks ago when they said to render unto Caesar what is Caesar's and to render unto God what is God's. Just the smugness and the ignorance of American history, of Christian theology is wild. And like you pointed out, on Jefferson, we talk all this time about the wall between the church and the state based on one line in the Jefferson letter that he wrote talking about this sort of thing, at a time when different religious sects controlled European governments, when different Christian sects controlled before their American states, controlled some of the states, and used it to punish other Christian sects that they didn't agree with. Like it was illegal to be a Catholic in Maryland until the Constitution was ratified. For example, at least you paid huge fines to do so. But all of these founders, including Thomas Jefferson, wrote consistently about the need for education in America to spread Christian virtue and Christian values. They talked about consistently about how this Constitution is entirely inadequate for an immoral people. And these folks who people like Stephen Colbert want to cite to make their case actually believe completely the opposite from them. But you would never hear that in the audience because they're so unconcerned with alternative viewpoints.
Yeah. Why is it that they're so threatened by one guy? It's not like, we're at some great risk of the entire government imposing Christianity on everybody. Like Mike Johnson, one guy who says, yeah, I read the Bible. How is he some monster threat? Because last I checked, all of our institutions are right now kind of being run by people who despise the Bible. I'm not under the impression that there's some great risk of Christian nationalism taking over.
Well, one person speaking the truth might actually be a threat. The darkness absolutely hates the light. Like when you turn on that light the first thing in the morning and your eyes hurt just to see it. There's been a lot of atrophy in Washington, D.C., where there's an entire Republican Party that can talk to you up and down all day and night about the need to cut this tax bracket that affects almost none of their voters, or the need to change this regulatory policy that affects almost none of their voters, or the need to send more guns and forces to Ukraine, which affects almost none of their voters. But there are very few Republicans out there who are strong and are capable and are confident in the truth and in their religious beliefs and in morality to go out there and be able to stand up to it. And that's why so many places have been steamrolled by this transgender nonsense. That's why so many places have been steamrolled by left-wing kind of morality, why people feel like they don't have the moral arguments to say, no, a wildly crazy adult man is not allowed in my daughter's bathroom because it's immoral and it's wrong and it's dangerous. There's been such an atrophy. So I'm hopeful, although that Sean Hannity interview, there was a lot of backtracking from Speaker Johnson. I'm really hopeful that maybe he'll actually be able to give voice to so many people, and really millennia of tradition that say, hey, hang on a second, America. We're in a pretty wild and completely incorrect place.
No question. And I'm hopeful too. This is a big job to be Speaker of the House. It's a lot of, herding cats, they say. But it seems critical to me that he be a speaker that is the same guy we saw in previous iterations in Congress, where he would stand up and kind of forcefully talk about the things he believes in, why it's good, and what we should fight for. I just hope he doesn't succumb to all of the pressures of leadership that so many do.
A lot of this job is tactical, for sure. The speaker is not a king. The speaker has to work with a wide range of Republicans and sometimes even Democrats who come from different religions and different backgrounds and different constituencies. So it's not exactly something that's just ideological, but ideology does play an important part in it. I mean, for example, you see Mitch McConnell out there, who's very much a tactician, basically ready to shut down the government over funding to Ukraine. Now, that's something that he wants to do because it's core and central to his ideology. Imagine if a conservative Republican got up there or if Mitch McConnell took that kind of vigor to the border fight, or if Mitch McConnell took that kind of vigor to abortion. It wasn't just a senator from Alabama out there standing on his own.
Yeah.
Well, that would change. So, while it is a tactical position, there's a huge amount of what you really care about that goes into it.
Totally. And when you say it out loud, people have to pick a side. So get out first and say it. And like you said, Tommy Tuberville is one of the only people who's like standing up for anything decent. I noticed today, I'll get into this later, but there's a story right now about the Marine Corps Commandant, General Eric Smith, who just became Commandant recently. He was out running this weekend, and he had a heart attack near where he lives near the Marine Barracks at 8th and I. And we don't know the status of his health right now. It sounds rough. He's been hospitalized as a result of all of this. And I'm watching today, everybody's attacking Tommy Tuberville over this. The man just had a heart attack, the Marine Corps Commandant, and they needed to put some 3-star in charge because they don't have an assistant commandant right now in the Marine Corps that's been confirmed by the Senate. The reason for that is because Chuck Schumer hasn't confirmed one. That's why that's happened. And the reason for that is because the Pentagon keeps funding abortions so they don't get a blanket sign-off from Tommy Tuberville. Tuberville's like, you're breaking the law. I'm not going to give you sweeping nominees a go-ahead. You'll put them through one by one. And Chuck Schumer refuses to do it because that's how much they love abortion. He prefers that over having a military be ready. And it is amazing to me, Chris Bedford, to watch all of this play out. And then the media will ape the talking point. They say, oh, Tommy Tuberville is making the military less safe. And it's opposite world constantly, every single day.
And when the Department of Defense was challenged, I think it was this week, to try and produce any of its data that said that it was central to their military readiness to provide abortion on demand to soldiers and to provide sex changes, they were unable to provide any of that evidence because it's just ideology. It's got nothing to do with military readiness. It makes no sense on a military readiness standpoint. And Tommy Tuberville's out there, and Democrats are being dishonest. Although I will also say, I mean, I hope the Commandant gets better. I really do. But if I was President of the United States, I think the first thing I would do would be accept the resignations of everyone who was over 2 stars in the Pentagon and say we're going to get rid of some of these political glad-handers and we're going to go back to having actual officers. And, hey, if we could win a war, that'd be good too.
That would be really good. Chris Bedford, thank you very much, as always, sir, from the Common Sense Society magazine. Good to talk to you today, sir. All right, let's head back to the phones. We got Mike calling in from Stevens City, line 2. Mike, good afternoon. You're on the Vince Coglianese Show.
Hey, Ben. Thanks for taking my call.
Yes, sir.
Where to start? I mean, first of all, Jefferson had nothing to do with the writing of the Constitution. He wasn't there. He didn't hold office of any kind at the time.
Yeah, he was in France during that period.
Exactly. And the letter that he had written to a Baptist church, and he used the reference of a wall in connection with a teaching that was recently done by one of their ministers, Roger Williams, who used the term of a wall of separation in his teaching on the need for there to be a protective wall against the world in the church.
Right.
But there is no place in the Constitution where it speaks of a separation of church and state. That's
right.
The other thing that people realize.
Did Mike fall off? He did?
No,
okay. Mike, sorry, you're fading out a little bit, unfortunately, but you're making a lot of great points. Let me add one other thing, though. The document Jefferson did write expressly, right at the top, declares that we have a creator who has endowed us with certain and unalienable rights. I don't think he was trying to dodge the role of God in all of our lives at all, including in our governance. Hold tight. I've got coming up for you, Philip Lenjicki is going to talk about China. We also have an update for you on what happened in the Senate today. We found out a lot more information about how much more unsafe the world has become on Biden's watch. That's ahead.